Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Joni Johnston, and it's time for our featured crime analysis of episode 10 of Unmasking a Murder. Now, in this episode, we covered the case of Stephen Allwine, who was a spiritual leader and elder in his church at the time he killed his wife, Amy. During the trial, prosecutors repeatedly called him a narcissist and said he had little empathy for others and claimed that he hid his pathological personality behind the veneer of the church. Now, lately I've heard the word narcissist used to describe just about everything from someone who takes too many selfies to an arrogant politician to an ex who fell in love with someone else. It seems to be a real buzzword. So I thought I would spend our time today talking about narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder and talking a little bit about how narcissists can use religion and spirituality to take advantage of genuine believers and how important it is to stay true to your values. So first of all, narcissism is something that we all have. At its core, it's just a universal human drive to feel special and exceptional and unique. As a matter of fact, research tells us that most of us, even the really truly average ones like most of us, we think of ourselves as special. And this is a good thing because it motivates us to dream bigger and work harder. A reasonable amount of healthy narcissism allows us to balance our own needs in relation to the needs of others. Otherwise, you or I would be a doormat and we get taken advantage of. Like psychopathy, narcissism exists on a spectrum, of course, from low to high. And even people with above average narcissism, most of them live their lives undiagnosed and successfully. And in many cultures, they kind of reward some of the demanding, annoying, arrogant, exploitive behaviors that we associate with narcissism. On the other hand, unhealthy or pathological narcissism refers to a need to feel special. And we talk about narcissism in a pathological way. We're talking really about four qualities. One is lack of empathy or impaired empathy for others. The second is grandiosity, somebody who thinks they're better than everybody else. A chronic sense of entitlement, somebody who thinks they deserve more than other people. And this chronic need to seek out admiration and validation from other people. These four qualities really create the core of narcissistic personality disorder. And so what this looks like oftentimes if you know somebody who's had this disorder is you'll notice several things. They have an exaggerated sense of self-importance. Again, they have a sense of entitlement. They require constant, excessive admiration. They expect to be recognized as superior, even if they don't have the accomplishments to support that. Oftentimes, they lie. They exaggerate their achievements and their talents. They're preoccupied with fantasies about success or power or brilliance or beauty. They believe they're superior to other people and they can only associate with other equally brilliant people. They often monopolize conversations and they belittle or look down on people that they perceive as inferior. They expect special favors and unquestioning compliance with their expectations. They take advantage of others to get what they want. They're oftentimes envious of other people, and they also believe other people are envious of them. Have difficulty or they're unwilling to recognize the needs or the feelings or thoughts of others. And they oftentimes insist on having the best of everything. Now, this kind of combination of behaviors and thoughts and beliefs makes it very difficult to have a genuine relationship with this person. Narcissism, when we talk about diagnosable narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, are so addicted to feeling special that they lie, steal, cheat, and do whatever it takes in order to feel that way. And while it's viewed very much as a disorder of kind of an inflated self-esteem and grandiosity, it is these things, but it really is more complicated because what we think is that people who truly have NPD have this internal disconnect between this unconscious sense of inadequacy or lack of self-worth, coupled with this conscious feeling of superiority. So it's not that their conscious self-esteem isn't high or too high, it is, but it's a defense. It's a rigid and ingrained defense against this underlying self-doubt. And this makes this kind of high self-esteem unstable. So these individuals are more vulnerable to any event that might threaten their exaggerated view of themselves. So whether that's interpersonal rejection, negative feedback, or criticism. So any hint that they are not the special person that they believe that they are results in anger and hostility because it's a threat to their ego. Because of this, they have significant trouble handling anything, again, that they perceive as criticism. And so how they respond oftentimes, they become impatient or angry when they don't receive special treatment. They have significant interpersonal problems because they feel easily slighted by other people. They think things are put downs that you or I would never think is a put down. We might automatically think it's a miscommunication. They have difficulty regulating their emotions and behaviors. They may react or overact with rage or contempt and try to belittle the other person to make themselves appear superior. They experience major problems during stress or adapting to change. And again, they have these secret feelings of insecurity, shame, vulnerability, and humiliation. Now, we don't know what causes narcissistic personality disorder. As with personality development in general and with many other mental health disorders, the cause is likely some combination of nature and nurture. We do know a few things about the environment that tends to breed this personality disorder. So one thing we know is that there's often this mismatch in parent-child relationships. Individuals who grow up and are diagnosed with NPD often had parents who either gave them this unrealistic, excessive adoration. You're the best. You're the most special. Nobody is as good as you are. You deserve everything that you want, etc., etc. Or the flip of that, which is excessive criticism. You're worthless. You're no good. So it's these kind of extremes of parenting. We also know that exposure to certain kinds of trauma can also negatively impact a child's personality development. In particular, some recent research has found that a certain kind of trauma, which we call betrayal trauma, has been linked to both the kind of grandiose and the exploitive parts of pathological narcissism. So obviously, trauma can be a lot of different things. It can be a natural disaster. It can be the death of a loved one. It can be a car accident. Betrayal trauma is when someone we depend on for survival, somebody that we're significantly attached to, violates our trust in some fundamental way. And that could be, for example, somebody who is sexually or physically abused by a parent, or somebody who's abandoned by a parent, someone who gets a sexually transmitted disease from someone that you thought was faithful. It's basically a shock to our system, and it really does challenge everything that we thought was true or that we believed in. It's a very, very severe trauma. And we know again that children who have repeated incidents of this kind of trauma are more likely to develop personality problems in adulthood. Now, let's talk a little bit about the issue of spiritualism or spirituality and narcissism. One of the most striking things about the Stephen Allwine case was the fact that he was a spiritual leader in his church. And I have to say that in my forensic work over the years, I have evaluated more than my share of former religious leaders who wound up in prison. And I've also seen the absolute devastation they can do to their victims, who not only have to deal with the trauma of what they suffer, but they often find their faith shaken and questioned. Now, is there a link between narcissism and religious beliefs or religious leaders? We don't know how often individuals with pathological personality traits wind up as religious leaders, but there was a really interesting study by Dr. Daryl Pulls and his colleague, Dr. Glenn Bell. Now, they did a study after they encountered what they believed were these pathological pastors during their work mediating faith-community conflicts. After getting permission to test their entire Canadian denomination's active and retired pastors, they put together a really ingenious study. So what they did is they put together a survey that asked the active and retired pastors a bunch of different questions about their prayer practices, their religious beliefs, demographics, etc. But they also embedded a validated test of narcissistic personality disorder in this survey. And they sent it out, and 30% of the active and retired pastors sent it back in. Now, doctors Pulls and Ball were stunned to find that between a quarter and a third of the active ordained pastors scored in the diagnostic range of NPD. This really is kind of a startling and somewhat discouraging statistic. Now, I certainly know that most religious and spiritual leaders are good-willed, and they're seeking God, and so I'm not trying to warn us all away from our religious faith. But what I am saying is it's important for you and for all of us to know how much damage a narcissistic religious leader can do to a church and to his or her followers, and how important it is that you trust yourself and that you set your own religious path. So if your pastor or your priest or your rabbi or your guru, is talking more about himself than about God, is constantly asking you or other members of the congregation to do favors for him, twists or uses religious teachings to control or criticize or reject others, doesn't practice what he or she preaches, won't tolerate any criticism or suggestions, and surrounds himself with people who enable and accommodate him, it may be time to stop and think. And it may be time to separate your spiritual beliefs from your place of worship. Because a wolf in sheep's clothing is still a wolf.